In Washington today, and both come down to one question. Who does the government actually answer to? In the House, Republicans just found a way around a wall that's blocked citizen-only voting for months, a path that needs 50 votes, not 60. And in the Senate, they're deciding whether Todd Blanche will run the Department of Justice. 2 chambers, 1 question. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show. I'm Jenny Beth Martin.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Here's where that fight stands right now today. The House finally broke a weeks-long standoff, and it is now running 2 plays at once to get the Save America Act across the finish line. The bill that requires proof of citizenship to register to vote and an ID to cast a ballot. The main play is reconciliation. The budget process that sidesteps the 60-vote filibuster and needs only a simple majority in the Senate. The catch is that the Senate's own rules won't let the Save America Act ride that process. So leadership in the House is working on a workaround, a federal fund that would pay states to verify citizenship and check IDs. It's at the very same time, the House is also bolting the Save America Act to every must-pass bill and really every bill that it can find. That way it goes to the Senate with the Save America Act attached to it. They're not leaving anything on the table in the House. 50 senators are already on the record for the House-backed version of the Save America Act. Tomorrow night, in a primetime address, the president will put election integrity front and center. Only American citizens should decide American elections. Full stop. Let's take a look at this clip from that shows the vote from last night.
On this vote, the yeas are 215, the nays are 211. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Okay, so what that is the House was voting yesterday on a national security appropriations bill, and they attached the Save America Act to that. So it passed. It's now on the appropriations bill, which will go to the Senate. And that is an example of what they are doing to help make sure that the Save America Act is attached to legislation that goes over to the Senate. Here's the story that nobody in the legacy media and the mainstream media really want to lead with. We now have records released by Senator Chuck Grassley and Senator Ron Johnson showing that Special Counsel Jack Smith pulled private text messages of 44 members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, and his team skipped the review that is supposed to keep prosecutors out of exactly this kind of material. Jack Smith told Congress under oath back in December that he did no such thing. The records say otherwise. And I think we may have a clip on that, but maybe that is for later in the show. Okay, it's later in the show. Now, let's talk about some good news for your wallet. Inflation cooled in January. The consumer price index actually fell by 0.4% last month, and gas dropped by almost 10%. That is real relief for Americans across the country. Now, we have to pay attention to the part that deals with gas. The reason the gas got cheap was because the Middle East got quiet. It's not quiet in the Middle East anymore. Iran broke the ceasefire, and we've had several straight days of renewed American strikes into Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is back under a naval blockade, and President Trump is addressing the nation tomorrow night. I don't know if he'll be discussing what is happening with Iran or not, but we just have to be aware. We have good news, but we also know that what's happening in Iran may affect gas prices. When the president says that Iran broke the truce, I'm going to believe the president of the United States, the commander-in-chief, not the mullahs in Tehran. As a country, we're grappling with how to deal with this enemy who wishes death to Americans. And right now, Todd Blanche is in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee for his hearing to become Attorney General. We want to ensure that Todd Blanche is confirmed, so we're keeping a close watch on Senators Cornyn and Tillis. As always, there's a lot of news to cover that affects you, your family, and our country's future. Robert McNeily is with me the entire hour. Robert, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Jenny Beth. So much to go over today. Such a short legislative schedule until August. I hope that some of these senators will actually stick around instead of taking August off. I mean, they have to campaign. I understand that. But my goodness, so many committee hearings today. And of course, we have to pass the Save America Act.
That is exactly right. And we have, they could work on Fridays and Saturdays. There's a lot that they could do. All right, Robert, you and I are going to get into every bit of this. But first, let's go through our call to action. And then before we go to the news, we're also going to have a special conversation with Teresi, who is going to be talking about the ever more popular move to cryptocurrency. So our call to action. The most important thing that you can do right now is call the Senate for the Save America Act. You can do that by calling 202-224-3121. Again, that's 202-224-3121. Speak to both of your senators' offices and tell them to pass the Save America Act. If you need talking points or answers to frequently asked questions, you can go to passthesaveamericaact.com. Okay, we're going to go back to Robert. And Robert, since you know the next guest, I'm going to let you introduce her, and then we'll go on with talking about her topic, which is cryptocurrency.
Well, thank you, Jenny Beth. Yes, in cryptocurrency, something that everyone is talking about, whether they're Gen Z to some of our older retired citizens, and the debate over whether or not governments should implement this. We've seen this in the European Union to a certain extent, and those calls right here at home in our very own Congress to even block digital currency from replacing our paper currency. Of course, the everlasting debate over gold and silver. But we're fortunate enough today to have the host of Free the Money. It's Teresi, and I have to say, I'm not afraid of most things. I'm afraid to go on the golf course with her. Before the show, we were talking about how incredible her swing is, and she's a golf extraordinaire, but that's for a separate discussion. Today, we're having Bree on for this crypto talk, and Bree, let's break it down. I'm wearing my green tie because, hey, I like making money. Let's just be honest about it. And we're all stewards of God's wealth and really how we can make a difference right here at home. But cryptocurrency really on the forefront of changing Americans' lives, especially with all that fraud, waste, and abuse out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. And it's great to see you again, Robert. Big fan of cryptocurrencies. I host a show called Free the Money, where I educate my audience on the value of cryptocurrencies and just how we can take back our sovereignty. It's no shock to anyone that our dollar has been greatly debased. And you can look at when Bitcoin first started trading at about 5 cents to what it is today. And yeah, people could say, oh, Bitcoin's down from when it was at about $120,000. But you can look at the facts from the past couple decades since the dollar has greatly lost value. So when you compare it to about 2009, when Bitcoin started trading, to today, the dollar's lost about 40% of its value. And I know you guys were talking about how the dollar is doing well right now and how gas is going down, but I think most Americans are still feeling great inflation. And just because Kevin Warsh might try and change the instrument that inflation is really measured on doesn't mean that inflation hasn't gone away.
Yes, and we've heard it said before that if it's not your keys, it's not your coins. So how does someone get involved in this, Bree? Is there a certain platform they need to be on? Or is it like investing on the Dow Jones or the NASDAQ, or really with your 401k? Because I think most of Americans, regardless of age, get kind of confused on where to start.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that's the cool thing about crypto is really for everyone. You know, my grandmother is even really into crypto. And that's actually a big reason to why I'm such a big believer in sound money, is because of the way I was raised and my grandparents and parents. So they are also really involved in crypto. But not your keys, not your coins is an old saying, meaning that if you don't have self-custody over your funds, you really don't own them. And it's kind of similar to, if you think about it, how, you know, we put our money in a bank and we go to the bank and we're asking for money. And a lot of the times they don't have the money for us. Like if you were to ask for a large sum of money, they really wouldn't be able to deliver it to you today. So with crypto, when you are buying and storing your money on an exchange, you actually don't have custody over those funds. The exchange does. So for me, I use a wallet called Edge Wallet, and Edge is great. It's my favorite wallet. I am in total control over my funds. I control my keys, and it's really easy. So like, even if you want to buy on an exchange like Coinbase, you could just send over your funds right away to a self-custody wallet. You can keep them on a soft wallet like Edge, or you could keep them in cold storage like a Ledger.
So interesting to get into, and I look to doing it myself, but you're sounding the alarm on financial privacy.
Yeah.
And what we've learned from the government, and even today in these congressional hearings and even the Jack Smith testimonies from months ago, that 44 members of Congress, 40 Republicans and 4 Democrats, had their communications seized. The same thing can happen with any kind of currency. And I think about, I'm with a big bank. They've been good to me for a long time, but they can actually turn that off when you look at the digital assets that we do have. So does a story like this make your case more urgent for cryptocurrency? And are you concerned with world governments, what they're trying to do, and that global order that we know the globalists are after in order to put in place, not only with their forms of digital currency, but also just trying to oppress free peoples? Do we need to worry about how to diversify our bank accounts? And where does maybe gold and silver fit into all of this?
Absolutely. That's a loaded question. Excited to dive into that. So for starters, with the creation of the Bank Secrecy Act in 1970, Americans have lost so much power over their money. And this is something that I think more and more people should be familiar with every day. So, everything is being watched. And, I think that is a huge infringement on our Fourth Amendment. And that's why I love crypto. And yes, there is a threat with many countries trying to incorporate stable coins and maybe these CBDCs into like people's lives, where they can have full surveillance over transactions, know your customer, everything being watched. So that is definitely a huge threat to our freedom. That is completely different than a decentralized cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, or my favorite, privacy coins, where there is no digital footprint of your transactions. But yes, I think stable coins are a huge threat. Right now, we're actually trying to get the Clarity Act passed. I am not against the Clarity Act. I just think, like anything, everything is neutral, and things can be used for good and they can be used for bad, just like with stable coins. So stable coins have, they're centralized, meaning that an example of a stable coin would be Tether. Tether can freeze funds. So people that are, maybe trading cryptocurrencies and putting it back into a stable coin that's pegged 1-to-1 with the dollar, they are definitely at risk of their funds being stolen. So we actually saw this happen recently. And I know we're not in support of, obviously, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, but Tether was actually able to freeze a large sum of these funds that they were using. And that means that they could also be freezing funds of your average American. And we have seen that. And you can actually go to a website called freedomdollar.com, where you can see all of the tracking that has been done on these centralized stablecoins, and you can see all of these funds that have been frozen. So that is definitely a big threat to our freedoms. I think without having actual digital cash that is not being able to be watched and censored and frozen, we don't have a free society. I know, especially Jenny Beth has talked so much about the importance of freedom of speech, and that's why I'm a huge supporter of you, is because if we don't have freedom of speech, we can't have a democracy, and without free money, we really can't have a free society.
And I'll toss it back to Jenny Beth, but we know that we've been fighting here for sound money, sound economic freedom. That's what Tea Party Patriots action is all about personal and individual liberties, but also a debt-free future. Yeah. And as the president has said, we'd probably be living like kings right now without all of this fraud, waste, and abuse. But before I send it right back to Jenny Beth, Bree, do we have the sound currency issue and sound digital assets? Are they two different fights or just one as a whole?
I think they're one as a whole. I think you can make the argument that Bitcoin is the most sound money we've ever had, with a 21 million coin cap. I'm a huge believer in gold. I invest in gold. I think gold is God's money, but at the same time, gold is scarce. It's not capped. And I think we have nearly $200 trillion of debt in America, with total liabilities. And I think, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you can agree that the debt is totally out of control. Congress has a huge spending problem. And if anything, Congress should be tracked for what they're doing. And they should be using some type of blockchain to be able to really keep a close eye on them, because they need to have conservative values. And I think that's what really frustrates me, is we're seeing conservatives in Congress who really do not have conservative fiscal values.
Yeah, so true there.
So, Bree, I have a couple of questions for you. Some of the people who are in our audience, they're probably wondering why we're talking about this, because it's not something that we normally talk about. But I think you've done a very good job of explaining that when it comes to crypto, we have to pay attention to what's happening to it, because if we don't, the government is going to come in and it's going to interfere with it and regulate it, and then do things like what you just were saying. It has the capability of seizing funds, even though I think originally people thought that that was not possible with crypto. Explain how you became so involved with crypto and how you became an expert on it.
Yeah, so as a little girl, I was around a lot of conversations regarding sound money. So my grandparents and my parents, always taught me about silver and gold. I remember just being able to see the tangible gold or silver in front of me. And I thought that was so cool, and just how it would appreciate over time, because as the dollar was devalued. So that kind of sparked that interest. And then I got into crypto in 2019, and it just became kind of an obsession for me. And then obviously, meeting people who are so educated in the space and really teaching me new things, and then being able to have my show and learn about new topics every week, it became a big part of my life. But I think it's important for the average American to understand cryptocurrencies, because it is a way for us to take back our money. And as we talk about the dollar being devalued, owning assets that do have a cap supplies or are deflationary is really, really important. And I think as we do step into times where, blockchain technology is going to be incorporated into our banking system without us even knowing, we're going to go over to stablecoin rails. The average American is going to have no idea. And when I was talking about the Bank Secrecy Act earlier, it's only going to get worse. As they try and update certain legislation, they are going to incorporate know your transaction. And I think that's very, very scary. And we saw how big of an impact that had during the truckers convoy in Canada a couple years ago now, where people were criminalized for even just donating money to these truckers. And that is a real threat to the average American. And I'm not talking about during this administration. I am a big supporter of President Trump, and I admire him very much, but we don't know what the next administration is going to look like. And I think if we don't understand the world we're going into, that's very, very dangerous. And being able to have your keys, be in control of your keys, being in control of your money, I think is very important. And I talk a lot on my show, and I know it might sound a little radical, but I interview a lot of guests that are so incredibly intelligent, that really break it down so simple of how we can be using cryptocurrencies every day, whether that's investing, which I think most Americans are pretty interested in and are familiar with Bitcoin. And, you can even buy the ETFs and everything, or actually spending. And I think that is a really exciting thing that more and more Americans, especially the younger generations, should become more excited about.
Yeah, I think that that's true. We hear a lot about it when it comes to investing. I don't think that people have thought about how you actually can use it also to purchase items. Bree, if somebody is listening and they haven't opened up accounts and haven't done anything with crypto, how would you encourage them to get started? Where would you direct them to learn more?
Yeah, so there's quite a few different resources out there. I think Edge Wallet does a great job at really educating their audience. And you can go to their website and you can find so many articles that you can learn a lot about self-custody, because that's truly what I'm passionate about. But also there's alternatives like I Trust Capital that allow you to maybe roll over your existing 401k or IRA into a self-directed account. And I think that is really, really great for people that want to have those tax advantages and maybe do it in more of a traditional finance way. But like I said, self-custody is really where you do have full control over your money. So being able to use a wallet like Edge is something I would really encourage. Or even just making a Coinbase or Uphold account is also another good option.
And then the last question, what is the single biggest myth about crypto that's keeping people from using it?
That it's dangerous. A lot of people say it's dangerous. And I think, or that it's very uncertain. And I think right now, like I said, we're trying to get the Clarity Act passed. I think they have a deadline they're trying to reach by, I think it was like August 7th. Cynthia Loomis was saying yesterday, and hopefully, they will make some, they will end up getting it passed, because I think in the end, it will be good to have more of regulatory certainty, because I think a lot of people are kind of scared right now. There's a lot of uncertainty around it. And then people talk about the volatility. But I will go back again to the dollar. The dollar has lost so much purchasing power in the past couple of decades. I think it's about 40%. Since the creation of the dollar, it's like 90%. So I would much rather keep my money in cryptocurrencies than keep my money in the dollar.
Very good. And then Bree, how often is your show on?
Yeah, my show is every week. So I post it to my YouTube page, which is Bree Teresi, and then also on X. And X is probably my biggest following. And, X has a lot of people on there that are very interested in crypto. And it's just my name as well, Bree Teresi. The show is called Free the Money.
Bree, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to get to know you, and I hope we get to know each other more in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you so much.
All right, don't go anywhere. When we get back, we're going to be breaking down the news. But first, let's take a break. You are the grassroots of America. You love this country. When you love something, really love it, the news doesn't just inform you, it fires you up. And you find yourself asking, how can I make a difference? That is exactly what this show is built to answer. Never, ever, ever, ever give up. We owe it to every American who has ever voted to make America great again. We owe it to our future selves. We owe it to this republic to stand tall, to stay active, and to be smart about how we spend our energy so that we can win. Here on the Jenny Beth Show, we're going to help you do exactly that. Every show, we will break down the news, connect it to first principles, and give you specific, effective ways to take action. Not just outrage, action. And I am so glad you're here on this journey with us to do it. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Welcome back. Robert McNeily is with me for the rest of the show, and there's a lot to cover today. Let's start with where we open, which is the Save America Act. Robert, the House is throwing everything at the Save America Act right now. Reconciliation, a state grant workaround, and bolting it to every single must-pass legislation. Walk people through why the Senate is still a wall.
Yes, so we have Reconciliation 3.0 before us, hopefully not a 4.0 as we go down this road, but that narrow majority for Speaker Mike Johnson. And so much credit to him as he's navigating this with his House majority team, who is really doing an amazing job. Perhaps they can give Senator John Thune over in the Senate a lesson or two. But let's go back to consequential legislation over the course of the last decade, and it's hitting that filibuster-proof majority of 60 votes. But we know now that 50 senators are on the record voting for the House version of the Save America Act. So for the naysayers over there, it's either they don't want it at all, they're afraid that you have to prove citizenship and actually show an identification against something that nearly 84% of Americans want. And we know on a daily basis, my goodness, how many times do we use an identification? in our daily lives, especially going to the airport, to even picking up certain items at the convenience or grocery stores. So this is common sense legislation, and even a majority of Democrat voters want this to pass. So you see a lot of these games happening in Washington, D.C., and that's where it really is standing right now. But there seems to be a lot of optimism as we go into House Reconciliation 3.0 in order to get that past the finish line. We know that President Trump, this is the very top of his legislative agenda.
Yeah, it is absolutely the top of his legislative agenda. I've been doing interviews about it this week, and every reporter I've talked to has said this is President Trump's number one piece of legislation. That's exactly right. Let me do a couple things here to explain what I understand from calls that I've had this morning. I've had quite a few briefings this morning about where things stand with the Save America Act. Yesterday, the House voted on a bill that some people online and in social media are saying was the NDAA. The NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act, and that they attached the Save America Act to the NDAA. But that part is actually not exactly correct. What they attached it to in the House side was the National Security State Appropriations Act. So it's the NSSA, which I didn't even know was exactly a thing. And probably most people listening don't, unless you're on Capitol Hill and work on Capitol Hill and in Capitol Hill all of the time. I'm there often, but thankfully I am not there so often that I know every single acronym. So they attached it to the National Security State Appropriations Act, and they used a process called MIRV, MIRV. And what that does is it's a legislative maneuver, and it helps hold and basically bolt the bill onto the new bill. So it bolts the Save America Act onto, in this case, the National Security State Appropriations Bill. And it makes it very, very difficult for it to be removed. So when that appropriations bill that would take 60 votes to get through the filibuster threshold moves over to the Senate, it's much more difficult to break that apart. So that's one thing that they've done. And there is a Hill article that really broke this down. This is why before the 4th of July, there were senator or congressmen such as Anna Paulina Luna who were objecting to rules and essentially shut down the House floor activity. So Speaker Johnson wasn't able to advance everything he was trying to get done before the 4th of July. He's come back. He's done what he does every single time, talked to all the congressmen and figured out how to get them to yes. And so one of the things she was worried about is if it moves over to the Senate, could be easily, the bill could fall apart. Like they could disassemble the Save America Act from whatever else it was. So they put it together. And then in this Hill article, I know that I'm looking down at my computer, but I'm doing that because I want to pull up exactly what this is. And let me send this link over so that we can put it on the screen right now as we talk. Just bear with me for just 1 second while I get that done. Okay. My producer, the maestro behind the scenes, is going to put that up on the screen. Okay. So they put it on, and Luna said her vote was conditioned on Johnson merging the Save America Act onto all appropriation bills and must-pass bills, and asked Tuesday about the plan of using MIRV, M-I-R-V, the MIRV maneuver liberally. Speaker Johnson said, be watching for a lot of MIRVs. So what that means, what I'm reading here as I read this article, is that Speaker Johnson agreed we're going to attach a Save America Act to as many pieces of legislation as we can. We will do it in a way that bolts it to the legislation, then we'll send it over to the Senate. And to me, that says they're doing everything they can to prevent, well, they're doing everything they can to leave the no cards on the table, so to speak, when they're working on this. So they're just using every tool in their toolbox to get it over to the Senate. Then on top of that, so that's happening with legislation that's moving through appropriation bills, which are bills that fund the government, and then other pieces of legislation. While that is happening, they're also working a different path. So there are two different paths happening right now. The second path is the reconciliation path. Now, remember, reconciliation is a maneuver that happens in the United States Senate that bypasses the 60 vote threshold. Now, it's a little tricky because when it comes to reconciliation, there's a rule called the Byrd Rule, named after Senator Robert Byrd, that says that each thing that is attached to reconciliation must have a significant budgetary impact, and it cannot be policy based. So most of the Save America Act, as we know it right now, the provision where it's proof of citizenship to register to vote, voter ID when casting a ballot, these are policy planks within the legislation. What the House is doing is working on creating grants that would go to the states. Maybe they'll even consider taxing states who don't do certain things. That would be something that maybe they could work on, or penalizing states or something else. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on that part. But at the very least, rewarding them through grants for doing certain things, such as requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote, such as bumping your current voter files against the SAVE database to make sure that the people who are on your rolls are citizens. And if they're not, you'd be the state or local government would be flagged with potential non-citizens, and they'd need to go research those people further to see if they really are a citizen, in which case the flag was not correct, or if they're not, then they could remove the person from the voter rolls. And then also grants to require not proof of citizenship, but a voter ID when casting a ballot. So that's a way kind of to get around the policy provision and make it what they hope is more reconcilable. And that is part of what they're working on right now. Now, inside of this reconciliation bill, there are a couple of other things that are going to be happening, maybe a few other things that are going to be happening. One of them is that there would be a supplemental budget, which the President, the Department of Defense has requested, that would be for the military and Homeland Security. Maybe not Homeland Security, but I guess the Department of War, Department of Defense. So we've been involved in the conflict with Iran, and there are other reasons why they are requesting a supplemental for the military. So they're requesting that. There is also some funding that I believe would be attached to, or would be in it, related to farm aid. So that is probably coming. And then yesterday we saw discussions from the House Budget Committee, and we discussed this here yesterday, the House Budget Committee Chairman, Jody Arrington, who wants to tackle some of the fraud that is happening right now with our government, with our tax dollars and government spending around the country, and try to tamp that down. Remember, yesterday we discussed the fraud, and we quoted Jody Arrington, the congressman who's the chairman of the House Budget Committee, as saying that there's $500 billion in fraud every single year that is happening with government spending. $500 billion, that is $500 billion. And Jody Arrington points out that this is $1 million in spending per minute of every hour of every day throughout an entire year. $1 million in spending. And I did some further calculations, realized that the average taxpayer pays, on average, in federal taxes, $7,250. That means it takes 68 million people working all year long to come up with their taxes and the other money that they earn. But the taxes for their entire year, 68 million people to pay for $500 billion in fraud. That is crazy. That has to stop. And right now in the Senate, there is a hearing that includes Nick Shirley talking about fraud. So I'm hoping they're addressing fraud as well. My point is, there are a few other things in the reconciliation bill besides and beyond the Save America Act. So we are watching that closely. So we've got two different tracks: MIRVing and adding the Save America Act to legislation such as appropriations and must-pass legislation. Those would require 60 votes over in the Senate. Then the other is the reconciliation process, which will have to survive the Byrd rule, but would get past the 60 votes with a 50 vote threshold. So that's what we're looking at right now. And what is refreshing to me about all of this is that the Speaker of the House is not giving up. The House of Representatives is not giving up. Many, not all, not enough, but many of the senators are not giving up. Most importantly, the President of the United States is not giving up. And so we have reason to have hope that they will be able to continue to work on this and hopefully get it passed before the elections this year. Robert, as you hear all of that, because I kind of am unloading with everything I heard this morning, I've been on the phone almost all morning long getting updates. What do you take away from it? Was it clear? Do you have any questions that other people who heard it might have questions about what I just said as well?
Well, thank you, Jenny Beth, for really breaking it down so well, because I think it is confusing. And as we're up against summer vacation, spending time with the family, heck, even enjoying America 250 and that great celebration throughout countless municipalities. And I hope that everyone has had a chance to go to Washington, D.C. I think the next big thing on the docket, that Grand Prix race on August 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, with that should be a lot of fun and free. So you just walk down to the middle of the district to check that out. But what I'm curious is on your take and really being, hearing the inside baseball here. Do you think the MIRV has a better chance? So coming from members like Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna wanting to use that gateway in order to pass this, or, really going on that reconciliation, because we've seen reconciliation very successful over the course of the early 2000s and how people have been able to maneuver and really manipulate their legislation in order to get it past the finish line? Well,
I think right now the big focus, from what I can tell, most people are focusing on reconciliation. I think that what the adding it to the appropriation bills and to must-pass legislation would get us, if they can get it through the Senate, understanding there'd still be the 60 vote threshold in the Senate, then we're going to get those policy provisions. So it won't be grants if you do the right thing, it will be law, you must do the right thing. So there are two different ways to look at what we might be able to get. And because of that, I think both tracks are worth pursuing right now. And if we wind up with grants that are more of carrots to encourage states and local governments to do what we are trying to get them to do, then we wind up with grants and we'll work with that. So I don't think that's the end of the world. I think that is much better than where we are right now as a country. But we're going to need people who are in the Senate, who work in the Senate, who can delve into every single aspect of the current existing law when it comes to Help America. The Help Americans Vote Act, HAVA, is the way that one is often called, thought of and spoken about. And then also the National Voter Registration Act, the MVRA, or motor voter law. If they can really look through all of that in close detail, perhaps they are going to be able to find ways to really push through what parliamentary procedure may allow. So I think both are very important. I don't know which one is going to be the one that succeeds, and that's why I think we can't leave anything off the table as we're working on it.
And as you put it so aptly earlier this week on the show, there has to be enforcement of laws because Congress writes and passes those laws, the executive then signing that through the office of the President of the United States, but then also that Article 2 being the enforcement mechanism in the executive. And we can dive into these DAs not doing that. I'm thrilled here in Georgia. We have a great state senator who will be ideally our next Attorney General, Brian Strickland, talking about that at the Greater Georgia Conference this past weekend about if these DAs don't want to enforce the law in the executive branch, well, go run for Congress or run for your state legislature and change that. That's our system. Of course, Article 3 with the judiciary determines whether or not those laws are constitutional. So we know that people, perhaps the biggest thing that they get in trouble with is speeding on the road. So you need to have that wonderful police officer there to enforce it. In fact, on the way to work today, I thought I might have gotten in trouble with that, but he pulled someone else over. So make sure you go the speed limit. And thank you for our men and women in blue. But Jenny Beth, is there something, we have these patriots all over the country, great viewers, calling, writing, contacting their senators to move them on this. And we've seen success throughout our history on big legislative moments. Is there anything that the states and the municipalities can do, whether in elected office, from county boards to mayors and even state legislatures, on this very moment to make sure that the Save America Act is passed? Because, I mean, their constituents are roaring about this.
Yeah, so we usually are talking about what the individual person in the audience can do to make a difference. When it comes to people who are elected to office, there are things they can do as well. One of the most important things right now that I can think of is for if you're a county commissioner, or you're on the city council, or you're part of a school board, or you're part of a state legislative body right now in a different, in a state around the country, write a letter supporting the Save America Act. Talk about how it is important, not just for federal elections, but for your own election. You want to make sure that only American citizens are voting for you, and that you are representing the people who were legitimately and legally and constitutionally supposed to be voting for you. Of course, we want to make sure that people who are here, who are permanent residents of this country, that we pay attention to them and that they are extended the rights that they are due. When it comes to citizenship, there are a few special privileges that we have, a few special rights, and one of those is voting for who is going to govern us. So write that letter and then circulate it among your colleagues and ask them if they would sign on. So then you could have a letter where you've got a bunch of different elected officials from a state supporting the Save America Act. They've circulated it among their colleagues. You've got to do it quickly. We need you to act quickly. And then send it to both of your senators, telling them to fight for this. If you as an elected official are hearing from your constituents as you're going about your life in your local community, and you're hearing your constituents say Congress needs to get its act together and pass the Save America Act, pass that information along. Oftentimes we can write letters as individuals to the Senate, and they pay attention to people who are elected a little bit more than they pay attention to the people who are just the constituent, the individual constituent of the senator. So I think that that's a good question, and that's my specific call to action if you're an elected official listening.
And now we have a big address tomorrow night, President Trump, 9:00 Eastern, on what could be Iran, what could be a great jobs and inflation report come last June and month to month as we see a strong economy. But we already have the offices of Senators Warnock and Ossoff right here in the Peach State claiming that this president will address what may have been fraud, what may have been incorrect results of the 2020 election, and their office is ready to pursue it. But, common sense would tell you maybe Senator Ossoff should just vote to pass the Save America Act if he has nothing to hide, because one of my big criticisms of the senator here in Georgia is that you not only need one form of ID, but two forms of ID to get into some of his campaign rallies. And we had a big one on Flag Day for, God willing, our next great senator from Georgia, Mike Collins, and there was no ID required there. So anyone could just come outside and enjoy that at our offices. Jenny Beth, any predictions tomorrow night on this big primetime address, as I'm sure people are enjoying the FIFA World Cup as well, but always good to hear directly from our president?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going to be discussed, but I think he's going to be talking about, based on the reporting that I've seen, it will have something to do with elections and election integrity. I also believe that we've seen some reporting online that says that there are some documents that have been classified that will be declassified. If there is information about the security of our elections that is classified, I think that as much as we are able to declassify, as long as it does not harm national security, it should be declassified. Americans should have that information and understand whether our elections are secure or not, and if they're not, exactly how they're not secure, so that we can work to improve the security of our elections. Regardless of who wins an election, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, and of course I have my own preferences, as each of us do, I want more than I want my candidate to win. I want every American across the country to be able to trust the outcome of the election. And so that is what I think is very important for us to be able to do. And it will be interesting to see exactly what he says. You know, there's one thing that I do think would be very good for him to do. I don't know whether he's going to do this or not, but I think it would be very good. I was thinking about how when President Reagan was president, he oftentimes gave speeches in front of the Oval Office, sitting at the Resolute desk. And he would ask people at least one time, and I think he did it more than once, to call their congressmen and their senators and urge them to support whatever it was that President Reagan was pushing at the time. I think one time that he did it, it was related to one of the major tax cut legislation he was trying to get through Congress, and he used the bully pulpit of the presidency to be able to urge people to make phone calls to their senators and their congressmen. I think that President Trump should take a page out of Ronald Reagan's book and do the exact same thing and urge people to make phone calls to their senators when it comes to the Save America Act. Okay, Robert, let's turn to another front. We've talked about election integrity and the Save America Act a lot. Jack Smith. We found out now, and I talked about this in the opening monologue, that he was spying on members of Congress, 44 members of Congress. Let's look at what Senator Mike Lee said on X. He said, I think we're about to pull this up, that this is Jack Smith. He spied on several other senators and me, and then he lied about it. And Mike Lee had this clip.
Did the toll records that you requested from the senators, did they include the content of the phone calls?
No.
Did the records that you requested, the toll records from the members of Congress, include the content of text messages?
No.
Can you explain for us on the record?
Yes, Jenny Beth, this has really boiled my blood this morning, because if that was an affirmative no, it was do not know, not using constitutional rights to not answer. It was a firm no. And these toll records, if that is not the case in Jack Smith's testimony, he has perjured himself before Congress and therefore should be prosecuted. Again, this is very deeply disturbing. And you have Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson, respectively, of Iowa and Wisconsin, very highly respected, even by their colleagues on Capitol Hill, very concerned with this. So you seem to have with these new records that it is not what was Jack Smith was speaking on just several weeks and months ago. So we'll be watching that very closely. And just knowing their communications offices, these are not light accusations that are coming out. And we know what's true now. The Department of Justice fully looking into the situation.
Yeah, so this isn't new ground for us, Robert. Here's the thing. The IRS targeted groups with Tea Party and Patriots in their name. They asked for the content of our prayers. They asked for book lists that people had when they were doing essentially book clubs with their Tea Party groups. They asked for back-end access to our website. They wanted the list of donors. Even donors are not legally entitled to have any, they had no business asking for it. There is a Supreme Court case that protects donor privacy, so that donors can't be intimidated, and they can still exercise their free speech without intimidation. And the targeted people who had donated to Tea Party groups were six times more likely to be individually audited by the IRS. And I warned back then, if we didn't do something about it and we didn't hold people accountable, that the weaponization of government would only get worse. And it has gotten worse. And we see that with this testimony and the revelation that Jack Smith, a special counsel, was spying on 44 members of Congress, looking at their private text. There were the safeguards that were in place, they ignored and bypassed. And that is maddening to me. It is very, very alarming. And Robert, I'm just wondering, what do you think when you realize that they were able to bypass these safeguards and look at the congressmen and senators' private communications? What do you think that says about individual citizens?
Well, I think that people have to start looking at things like WhatsApp to Signal to protect their private messages, because if they're looking at people who are the so-called public servants, 40 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and they're afforded those specific procedures and rights, it seems like there was a pattern of behavior here. And watching some of the Todd Blanche hearing this morning, it was even Senator Tom Tillis, who's retiring from the Tar Heel state of North Carolina, even admittedly not the biggest President Trump fan, stating that what's amazing about my colleagues on the other side, it's that they're okay with the pardons from President Biden, which was unprecedented considering the people he pardoned were not charged with anything. But when it comes to the pardoning of President Trump with January 6 participants, people who did not receive that Sixth Amendment right of a speedy trial, somehow that's null and void and shouldn't be happening. Of course, we know that's part of the Democrat Socialists of America, their playbook to get rid of that pardon, amongst other forms of our 3 branches of government. But I even have to go back to this pattern of behavior from the Biden administration and even prior to that. Remember, in the first term of President Trump, James Comey, on his initial book tour, this is before the seashell incident of 8647, said, well, I just sent a couple of agents over to the White House. The protocol was always to let the executive office of the President of the United States in the Eisenhower building on that White House campus know that something would happen like that. It's just a brazen attempt at spying on our public officials. And if they're willing to do that, this bureaucracy, this deep state of Washington, D.C., what will they do to these private citizens? And in addition to that, going on to Christopher Wray and the way they spied on pro-life Catholics in Virginia, and goodness gracious, the people who went to their kids' school board meetings to protest transgender activities, the list goes on and on.
It does, and it's quite alarming, and we have to just keep watching it. Jack Smith needs to be held accountable. Mm-hmm. He lied to Congress, and he lied to Congress. He needs to be held accountable. And he and people from the Biden administration went after other people they thought were lying to Congress. He should be held to the same standard he was holding people to. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Okay, so this morning, Todd Blanche was in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He has been nominated to be the Attorney General by President Trump. Democrats are hitting him hard on the weaponization fund and Epstein files. Because we lost Senator Lindsey Graham, we have to watch even more closely, especially when it comes to Republican Senators Cornyn and Tillis, who we've just got to watch them. It will only take 50 votes to get him over the top, or 51 votes, and we're going to have to keep an eye on those two. So I want to kind of do this a little bit differently, but I want people to see what was going on in this hearing today. So we're going to play a few clips. First, the Democrats have tried to hit Blanche about Epstein files. So here's an exchange with Todd Blanche and Senator Dick Durbin.
Let me talk to you for a moment about the survivors who are in the room. There are 10 individuals who were exploited and abused by Mr. Epstein. They are here today. None of them have had a chance to speak to anyone in the department or FBI, though they've asked repeatedly. So can I get your word under oath that within the next 30 days, you will personally sit down with these 10 victims and hear their case in terms of what needs to be done by the Department of Justice?
Chairman, I appreciate them being here today. I also have somebody from my office who's spent her entire career working on cases like Mr. Epstein's. She's in charge of our task force investigating human trafficking. She's available to talk to them.
She can sit right next to you. She can sit right next to you when you meet with these survivors.
I have never said I will not meet with survivors.
Will you meet with these 10 survivors? I'm asking you on the record.
If they have lawyers, as you know, I'm prohibited from meeting directly with them. I have met with counsel for survivors, as has many people in the Department of Justice, over 30. But if they are represented by counsel, we will work with their counsel. If they don't have a lawyer, I will certainly make arrangements to make sure the right people at the Department of Justice meet with them. Absolutely.
Will you get it done within the next 30 days that each
I
of
will
these
get it done
survivors?
today, if that's necessary. I mean, my point is there's somebody here who can meet with them today, get their information, and arrange to meet with them.
I think
Absolutely.
you ought to be in the room.
Pardon me?
I think you ought to be in the room because you ought to hear this. You had singular responsibility for these files. There's a delay in meeting the statutory requirement on disclosure. You were involved in that. I think you ought to be part of this.
I am definitely part of it, and I have been from day one.
And it will be done within the next 30 days?
I can keep on repeating myself, but I said it could get done as soon as today. It could have gotten done last week. We remain available to meet with any victim or their representative at any time.
Will you notify the committee when you've done this?
That would be prohibited by law if they're talking about an ongoing investigation.
I'm asking you if you'll notify the committee that you met with the survivors.
It depends on what they said. I'm not sure I'm allowed to notify you if there's an ongoing investigation.
Okay, I love how Todd Blanche points out to Senator Durbin, you know that if they have attorneys, I can't meet with them. I have to meet with their counsel. But he was not just ready. Yes, I'll meet with them. I'll meet with them right now today if I have to. I just have to make sure I'm following the law to do it. Now, here's another clip from Todd Blanche saying, we will never not talk to victims. So let's watch that.
Certainly review it and make it available. When it comes to the victims of this horrible man, we will never not talk to victims. We will never not do everything we can to prosecute anybody that committed any crimes against any of these women. So that narrative is false. We have spoken with over 30 representatives of dozens and dozens of victims since this process started. Any victim, if they're here today, I would encourage them or their lawyers to meet with the FBI. We will 100% investigate. There are no closed investigations. If we learn today, if we learn next week, if we learn next month that there's an individual that we can investigate, indict, and prosecute out of the Epstein files, you better believe it, we will. And so we worked hard, the hardworking lawyers within the department to do the right thing to comply with the act, and we did, and we'll continue to do so, Chairman.
And then Senator Sheldon Whitehouse was trying to play gotcha with Todd Blanche. Let's take a look at that.
This seems to be the most troubled Department of Justice in history. Here are some of the misconduct findings against your U.S. attorneys. And if I haven't put it up yet, here's a word cloud of the commentary by federal judges about the conduct of your DOJ. These are red flag words that when I was a U.S. attorney would have provoked at minimum an internal conversation about what the hell went wrong, and very likely a conversation with OPR and maybe OPR pursuit. Words like pretext mean a lot coming from a judge about a government argument, usually enjoying the presumption of regularity. We need answers. I need you to be able to tell me that this kind of misconduct is going to stop if you're confirmed as Attorney General. Can you say that?
The Department of Justice works hard. The prosecutors work hard every day, and I appreciate the hand-picked words that you have behind you right now, but that's not reflective of the 100,000 indictments and informations that have been filed to do the work that I talked about earlier today. And so while cherry picking a few isolated words from district court or magistrate judges in certain districts is something that you're entitled to do, it's absolutely false to suggest that this Department of Justice is not executing as we should and doing the right thing every single day.
I doubt any Democrats are going to vote for Blanche. So but let me just say something. I think that the way that Blanche has answered every one of the questions that they are bringing up and the concerns that the Democrats are bringing up is factually and with the law and in a calm manner that we would want to see an attorney general talk about, not get completely emotional and upset, but deal with the law and deal with the facts and do so in a respectful manner and in the manner in which the position of attorney general demands. Now, I am a little more concerned about Senators Cornyn and Tillis, though I've read online Tillis may be okay with Blanche. But let's watch this exchange with Senator Cornyn, because that's the one we're going to have to keep a close eye on.
I believe you have said that the weaponization fund is a moot issue. Is that your position?
Yes, it is a moot issue, meaning there is no weaponization fund. The weaponization fund is dead. It's not moving forward.
Well, I would refer you to the settlement agreement. Do you happen to have a copy of that in front of you?
I do not.
Okay,
Senator.
well, you probably know what's in it.
I'm familiar with it, yes.
I'm sure you are. On page 4, this settlement agreement may be modified only upon the written agreement of the parties. Has there been a written agreement of the parties to modify the settlement fund?
No, the settlement fund's just not moving forward. There's no modification. It's just, it never started. No money went from the Treasury to any other account. There's no commissioners. It's not moving forward.
Well, so the settlement agreement remains as it was originally, but I hear what you're saying. Is the settlement agreement enforceable as a contract by the parties?
Well, yes, it's an enforceable document. So I suppose if President Trump's counsel sought to enforce it, they potentially could.
Including the weaponization fund?
Well, they could try to enforce the contract. They can't force the Department of Justice to move forward with the weaponization fund. They could potentially say that, I suppose, that we breached by not moving forward. They haven't done that, and I'm not aware that they're planning on doing that. Like I said, Senator, and Senator Durbin talked about this, but I've talked extensively with you and other colleagues about potentially codifying so there's no weaponization fund, which is certainly something that could be done. And I wasn't meaning to insult this body, but just that in response to questions from senators about whether that could be done, we very much are okay with that.
But just to be clear, the President of the United States, who is the plaintiff in this lawsuit, has not agreed in writing to delete the weaponization fund, and there's no guarantee that he or one of the other plaintiffs might raise that issue by way of a lawsuit and a breach of contract lawsuit in the future.
Well, Senator, the plaintiffs have no power over the fund. The fund was administered solely by the by the 5 commissioners and through the Department of Justice. So no, they don't have any power with respect to the fund at all. I suppose they could bring a lawsuit and then we would litigate it. But even if we were litigating it, there's no fund. So the results of such litigation, whatever it would be, wouldn't be a revival of the fund.
Robert, what do you think of the job that Todd Blanche did in this hearing?
Oh, it's been extraordinary, Jenny Beth. Just watching this morning, looking forward to watching some more as well, as these tend to go, roughly 9 to 5, pending what is on the item for the hearings and also for the confirmations. But in essence, it's almost let bygones be bygones. So we know for Senator Cornyn losing in the reelection attempt to the Attorney General Ken Paxton, who will likely be the next Texas senator. Of course, no race is in the bag by any means. Have to work hard there, even in the Lone Star State. But what I also liked that Todd Blanche did as the Deputy Attorney General, and I want to share this with the audience as well for those maybe outside of Washington. Deputies, especially in the Department of Justice, they really have the day-to-day operational authorities and responsibilities in what happens at the Attorney General's office. So much credit to Pam Bondi. Some had criticism, but when you look at the cabinet, in or at times they can be overheads or figureheads of the entire department. Of course, setting policy and getting it to be enacted. But it's really those deputies who are there behind the scenes who are the unsung heroes. And that's why he was able to respond in such a manner, even as acting attorney general, to Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and said, you have the convenience there on the dais, sir, to lie to the American people and to tell untruths. And there was simply not a response from Mr. Whitehouse at that point. He was somewhat of a deer in the headlights. And I'm glad that you have an administration willing to fire back peacefully and patriotically, because they truly are the subject matter experts. They are the most transparent administration in history. And I know we have this for the Constitution Minute, but I'd like to add with the Attorney General's office, there's this lie going on the left that so-called Republican attorneys general, even Mr. Barr in the first term, are not independent enough. They're independent of the president. The president appoints these people with the consent of the Senate, and unless there's an egregious moral hazard with the nominee, they are rightfully should be appointed to those seats. There shouldn't be a usurping of that and the executive authority because they won the election. The people have put them into office in order to put these people up in these positions, these appointed positions. And let's just go back on the history of some of these attorneys general. Eric Holder once called himself Barack Obama's right-hand man. In fact, a brother in the fight. What about Janet Reno? We're learning so much more now about what happened in Waco, Texas. Was she the one that ended up authorizing the terrible atrocities that happened there? We really only have two eyewitness accounts given the FBI negotiator and the gentleman who actually jumped out of that window and was not burned or suffocated to death. But it seems as if too many questions happening there with government overreach back in the mid-1990s. My goodness, JFK, one of our finest modern presidents, had his own brother, Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., serving in that role. Actually, that's the reason why any one of the immediate family members of the president cannot take a salary. It's because of the result of the tenure of Bobby Kennedy as Attorney General. So for those on the left that might be watching this show, yes, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump did not take a salary serving the United States government in that first term, and continuing now with Jared Kushner's services abroad in dealing with the Middle East issues. So I just want to throw that out there. And I think Todd Blanche doing an amazing job against the jackals on the far left up there on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, he absolutely is. And let's pause a moment for that Constitution Minute you were just talking about. We need to remember where the job of the Attorney General even comes from. It was created in the very first Congress in the Judiciary Act of 1789. The design was deliberate. The Attorney General is the nation's chief law enforcement officer and the president's chief legal advisor. But the Senate does have to confirm the person. That confirmation is a check. It is the legislative branch confirming whether the president's nominee can be trusted with the most powerful law enforcement office in the country. So when you watch a hearing like today and you think a lot of it's a bunch of political theater, and honestly, some of it is, we need to remember that that hearing is the process in the Constitution has set up to ensure that that hearing triggers the final vote and the approval and consent from the Senate. And that is what our Constitution wanted to happen. And that shows us it's working. The Constitution is working as it is intended. The Senate is a gate, and that's really the whole entire point. So as frustrating as the theatrics can be, it also gives us a chance to see what the person who's being nominated is made up of, how they can handle ridiculous questions under fire, and it gives us some insight into how they'll be able to do their job. Okay, now the last topic, and I know we've gone long today, but I wanted to make sure people had an overview of what happened in that hearing. It's very, very important. We need the seat of the Attorney General filled, and Todd Blanche is showing us he can do a good job in that position. Okay, last thing. Yesterday, for the first time since 2019, there were two justices sitting. We had two justices who went and testified before Congress. And I was a bit alarmed. So we heard about threats that the justices have had. physical threats, violent threats against them. And Justice Barrett said she talked about what has happened to her in her own words about the threats that she's had. She talked about her 12-year-old son asking what the bulletproof vest was after her security detail handed her one. Let's listen to what Justice Amy Coney Barrett said yesterday.
So I thought I would just share a little bit about how the threats have affected me and my family personally. They have required me my children to think about and see things that children should not have to see or think about. One example is when threats to my life were particularly intense a few years ago around the time of the Dobbs leak. My security detail sent me home with a bulletproof vest, and I carried it into my house, put it into my bedroom, dropped it down on a table, turned around, and my 12-year-old son was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, and he wanted to know what it was and why I had it. And I didn't know how to respond because maybe I lack imagination, but I didn't expect that performing this service was going to put me in the position of explaining to my children what a bulletproof vest was and why I had to wear one. It's also been reported in the news that roughly 6 weeks ago, I was the victim of a swatting incident. At that point, one of my teenage sons, opened the door to go out with friends and saw in our street, it was full of police cars who had responded to a false report of gunshots and raised voices in my home. I was very, very grateful that I had Supreme Court police outside my home because they were able to stop and meet with and explain to the county police that it had been a false alarm, and so the police did not actually attempt to enter our home. Many of us, me included, have received threatening anonymous deliveries designed to intimidate and harass us. They are often sent in the name of Judge Salas's son, who I think, as you mentioned in the beginning, Mr. Chairman, is deceased because he was killed by a disgruntled lawyer who showed up at Judge Salas's home intending to kill her, but her son, 20 years old at the time, opened the door and took the bullet instead. Her husband, standing behind, was seriously injured. So I think the message on these deliveries being sent in his name is clear. As Justice Kagan said, federal judges across the country, throughout the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, continue to do their jobs without fear or favor, but the threat level is really high.
Robert, there have been more than 500 threat investigations against federal judges just this year. It's compared to 800 for all of last year. And I really should go back and research how many there were, say, before 2020. But what does this say to you about this moment that we're in right now?
Well, there's no room for political violence. And what I find about it's coming mostly from the far left, tragically. But look at these appointees of President Trump on the high court, from Amy Coney Barrett to Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch. They don't always rule in line with the administration. And we have this wonderful debate happening right now about contextualism happening on the court, regardless of the recent decisions and even the past decisions of their tenure. So this is something that we cannot let stand as an American people. And right here on this show, right here with Tea Party Patriots Action, we always stand firm on our call for dialogue and discussion and peaceful discourse, what our country was founded on, because it's so true. As Abraham Lincoln once said, that if we were ever to fall as a nation, as a republic, it's going to be from within. We're too great a nation of what we've contested with. God has held us truly in the palm of his hand. And I'm calling for today, once again, that renewal to cease any and all political violence, regardless of disagreements. And my goodness, it's the spice of life to sometimes have a discussion with someone that might not see things the same way as you do. But that cornerstone of this republic truly is Article 3 and the judiciary, and that non-partial judges and courts in order to bind this all together. So my thoughts and prayers with everyone who is in the arena, and kudos to those who remain brave during this time, because we have to remember they're human beings and they have family members as well.
Yeah, they do have family members. And I think that the fact that Justice Amy Coney Barrett did not think about the kind of threats that would come to her and her family some of them, how can you? They're just so vile that unless you also, it's hard to imagine because they're just so vile. So I can appreciate the fact that she wasn't able to really conceive of that before she was nominated and accepted the position and was actually confirmed. It also is something that we have to understand. They're justices of the Supreme Court, and so their lives are always at risk because of their position. I did look up in 2019, there were apparently, from a quick search with Brave giving me the answer, so it's Brave AI, 179 credible threats against federal judges investigated by U.S. Marshals in 2019. So now we're at 500 or so in the 11-month period ending in September 2025. Justice John Roberts noted over 1,000 serious threats were investigated in the 5 years leading up to 2025. So there are quite a few, but there are many, many more right now than what they have had to deal with before. Our friend Charlie Kirk was assassinated. We've seen attempts on President Trump more than once, including most recently at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And the threats and the violence and the assassination attempts are absolutely horrible. They must stop. And the swatting that we're seeing happening to public people is wrong as well. Those swatting incidents thankfully, the police going into them, I think they are so aware of what swatting is now that they're a bit more calm when they go into these situations, but it uses a lot of police resources. It takes them away from other legitimate threats that are happening, and it puts the people literally in a bullseye inside the house where the swatting has happened, without even realizing that all of a sudden all of a police force is bearing down on them to figure out if they've done something terribly wrong inside that house. It's very, very intimidating. Justice Amy Coney Barrett said that she continues to do her job and she's not intimidated by it. Yet you can also tell, listening to her in her testimony there, she's very bothered by it. Mm-hmm. She's bothered by it as a woman, as a justice, and also, most importantly, she's bothered by it as a mom and as someone who's had to deal with threats in the space that I'm in and being a mom. It's very difficult because you want to do everything you can. Your instinct as a mom is to protect your children and make sure they are able to go live their life. You give birth to them and you have a natural maternal instinct. You're born with it to protect them. And so she is dealing with that natural maternal instinct that she has and still staring down such evil. And I appreciate that from her. And I hope and pray she continues to have courage and is willing to do whatever it takes to do her job. And I don't say that lightly, because listen to everything that she's had to go through. She gets up every single morning when she could stop and continues to face down those threats and do what she thinks is right for our country. And I appreciate that about her. The threats must stop. I hope that the Supreme Court gets the funding it needs to increase security and to do what it takes to protect our Supreme Court justices.
Yes, and if I may add, just Jenny Beth, and also I call on the Democrats on Capitol Hill, say something about this stuff. Make these far left stand down. Perhaps they don't have the power of Almighty God, but what they do have is the power of influence. We can call in with our words life and death, truly, and I hope that they really do that as leaders in our country. But also, I don't want people to be apathetic either. Go out and vote, get involved in your communities, and participate, because, again, more dialogue, as Charlie always said, leads to more peace and understanding, and I think we can accomplish that even in these scary times.
That is exactly right. And Justice Amy Coney Barrett doesn't vote and make the decisions that I would in every single case that's before her. It really doesn't matter. She should not have to worry so much about the safety of her family and herself in order to do her job. Mm-hmm. And the same goes for every single one of the justices on the court and all of the people who are serving throughout the federal bench. They wind up getting it doesn't matter which political party they are. It doesn't matter which president nominated them. Their lives should not be at risk. And we need to do what we can to help protect that as much as we are able to. And you're exactly right. We have to keep praying and we have to stay involved, and the Democrats need to step up and call this out. And if it's happening to liberal and Democrat judges, we'd be calling it out as well. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. It's wrong and it must stop, especially when it affects their children.
Yes, I agree 110%. No question about it.
All right, Robert. Well, we have gone way over our time today, so thank you for being with me today.
Oh, always a great discussion, and I hope everyone's having a great hump day in America. Enjoy some FIFA and stay involved.
Absolutely. And before you go, here's what you need to do before you sign off completely. The Save America Act is not dead. We've gone through that. The House is fighting for it on every single front. And the Senate, we really have to keep our pressure on the Senate. So call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121. Again, it's 202-224-3121. Ask both of your senators, ask for both of them, call each of their offices and tell them to pass the Save America Act. It's an election integrity bill that will make it easy to vote and hard to cheat and make sure only American citizens are voting in American elections. You can also go to passthesaveamericaact.com for more information. Thank you for being with me today. Only American citizens should vote in American elections. I'm Jenny Beth Martin. This is the Jenny Beth Show. God bless you and God bless America. We'll see you again tomorrow. If you enjoyed today's conversation, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It really helps us reach more people who care about liberty and the Constitution. You can find this and other episodes at jennybethshow.com, as well as Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, and your favorite podcast platform.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.